So welcome to the fourth episode of Leaders on a Mission. And I'm Simon Leach, and I launched this podcast really to share the stories of inspiring leaders who are creating a healthy and sustainable impact on the world. So in today's episode, I'm joined by Jordi Ferre, CEO of Agrofresh, a publicly listed technology business addressing the challenges of food waste. Now, Jordi is a citizen of the world, traveling the world since an early age, brought up in Europe, became an American citizen 20 years ago, married to a Thai lady. Jordi is a massive Barca fan with an uninterrupted season ticket holder since 1977. And when he's not attending the big games, I know he gets the stream straight through on his mobile phone. So Jordi, look, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me, Simon.
Absolutely, my pleasure, my pleasure. Now, I was just kind of reflecting, we met a couple of years ago, I remember in London when you were flying through and, got a chance to sit down and have a coffee and, got to know you at that stage. And
good old days when we could.
Good old days, exactly.
London without any issues.
Exactly. I've really missed, the simple things like having a coffee and just kind of catching up and
travel and move around in the world, which is exactly what I always strive for,
Exactly. I know it has been a challenge. How have you personally found, dealing with COVID and the challenges of kind of being in lockdown? How have you managed to stay sane during that process?
There's a couple of things, right? You got the personal side of things and you got the professional side of things. Professionally, obviously, I committed myself to be as close as possible to people, even more so than normally. So you organize constant calls. Some of the calls you do are just to check on people. You got very personal with some of the people around the world, communicating with them personally on WhatsApp. Done videos and keeping up the morale and letting them know the central command is still in command and that everything will be all right and we're making the right decisions. So I do think that giving that type of confidence is very, very important. So I've been able to do that, although I miss being out there. I miss being out with customers and being out with the teams. On the personal side, you have to adjust. I have to tell you that at the beginning was kind of fancy working from home. Then there was a moment, I think everybody goes through that you go down a little bit because you say your world is upside down. You don't have the freedoms and your usual life doesn't go through as you always done, right? Traveling, having the freedom and doing things. And then at the end, you just adapt. Like you're a human being, you adapt. And I'm trying to look at the bright side of things. And the good thing is I've never been home that long. And I've never been able to enjoy the day-to-day of being with family and being closer. So I'm also enjoying that. So when all of this is behind us, I don't know, I think I'll be a little bit in the middle. I used to travel a lot. And now I think that I will continue traveling, but maybe I'll slow down because I also get a good taste of being home more often and enjoying the simple things at home too.
Absolutely, yeah. How much of your time would you normally spend on the road?
Well, I mean, this is, Simon, all my career since I remember, easily I spend most of my time, like 50% of time traveling, easy. Since I remember, it's not because I'm at Agrofresh, but since I remember in my previous jobs, I always run global businesses, which is always what I wanted to do. And I'm a proud guy to feel like as comfortable in Shanghai, like I feel in Sao Paulo or anywhere in the US. And that's kind of where I like and managing different cultures and things like that. So I travel all my life and I travel across the world, really. I mean, I've been in all 4 continents constantly on an annual basis. I am a 3 million miler in American and 1 million miler in Delta, and I don't know how much in United and all these things. So I've always had a very busy schedule when it came to travel.
Yeah. And so when we go back, when we come out of this COVID situation and, there's no virus, say, how different do you think things will be for you in terms of that kind of profile of traveling?
I think that we always like to, especially because the press, things will never be the same. And I don't think that way. I think that, I remember defining, events in the past 20 years, like 9/11 and the crisis of 2008, that you hear the press, nothing will be the same, everything is going on. And at the end, things go back to normal. I mean, you even remember that. So I think that little by little things go back to normal, and people will still have the need to interact. But I still think on my case, that probably what happens is you're forced to learn to be more efficient. Therefore, I think that I see a future with, of course, I'll continue to travel, but I may cut down some of the travel that I've now seen that it can be more effective if you don't, to do it from the office or from home. So you don't need to travel all the time to every event. So I think there'll be a little bit of a balance between before the pandemic and during the pandemic. There'll be kind of a balance in being more selective, how you travel, what kind of decisions you make in that respect. Because it's not only the money of traveling, but it's the time especially, right? Simon, I mean, I've done so many travel across different time zones, and one knows very well that it takes a toll as well over time, because you have to completely all the time adjust yourself to the new time zone and keep going, because you can't go back. So I think there'll be a little bit of more efficient way of doing things, but I would not say that we'll stop traveling or we will not continue to do what we need to do. That's kind of my feeling at this point in time.
Absolutely. And no doubt, as you've said, finding the time, you have a 2-year-old as well, right? So
yeah, you know what? That's another thing. I like to, I'm a very happy guy, but I like to complicate my life. That means that my retirement is now, my goalpost for retirement is now further away. Yes, I decided to start. I'm second time married, and my wife is younger, so yeah, we decided to have a baby. So I have a 2-year-old, and I got to tell you, even at my current age, I'm older and all that, but there's a different way you enjoy it, right? And because you're wiser, you're more calm, you basically know the things that you can improve from the first time. So yeah, I'm enjoying that a lot, and that's what I said personally on the lockdown. That was a fantastic experience for me to be more at home, stay home dad in a way.
Oh, beautiful. And, have second chances. That's what it's about, having second chances. Not many people can, with things like having kids where, you really can reflect 20 years ago and go, actually, you think about that. What would I do differently? And how would I do it differently? It's
right. That's
it's a big thing, Jordi. It's a big thing.
A lot of friends tell me that I'm crazy, right? Because at this point in time, I should be looking more into, eventually, winding down a little bit in the career and on your life. But I do think that they say you're very brave, and I don't think so. I think you got to live day by day, and you have to enjoy what you got. And, life, you can't force things. Things come the way they come, and you have to enjoy them as they come. Yeah. And it's all good. It's all good. It's nothing. All
blessings. Good. All blessings, Jordi. Absolutely. Now, tell me, let's take it right back. Just thinking about as you were growing up, and did you grow up in Barcelona?
Yes.
You
I'm
did,
born and bred and educated in Barcelona, really.
In Barcelona, yeah. And thinking, what were the major influences that really helped shape, the ideas and the aspirations of a young Jordi?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I had different influences that made me today who I am. I think that on one side, it was my dad. Who passed away in 2004. He was a marketing executive, one of the marketing pioneers in Spain. And he'd written books. He was a professor. And he became a PhD in economics. He was a very well-known gentleman over especially in Spain. He had been also in European bodies, and he had traveled, but he was mainly, I would say he was pretty much from a professor, marketing guru. He was he was a very prominent person. And you can Google, you can still find a lot of his publications and things like that. So obviously, my dad influenced me in that way. So at a very early age, I knew I wanted to go to business school and become an executive. I was lucky that way because, you hear all these young people that don't know still what they want to study or become. And I kind of my father never really told me you got to do this, but I had the visual influence of seeing that at home. So that was extremely important. Then I think that the other influence I had is that my parents had the good decision to send me, since I was 5, at the Lycée Français, the French school in Barcelona. And that was it's an excellent school. Excellent school. And also very open, makes you think, réfléchir, like the French said. And I think that influenced me because since an early age, I was educated I was educated in a European sort of education, and I could speak different languages, and that influenced me to be more open to the world from a very, very early stage. So I think that's something that influenced me. And I don't want to get political, but it's interesting. And one of the accomplishments, I think, when you introduced me like a multicultural guy, but I had to work to be. Some people are born multicultural. Like my daughter is half Thai, half Spanish. She's American. So she's multicultural by nature. I didn't have to, but I became. I became because both my parents are from Barcelona, they're Catalans. And, it's you have to become. And that's so much inside me, and that's my real true vocation. It was not like it was assigned to me by the fact that I had parents from different places. And naturally, I hope that I have become in that respect, right? Myself, like you said, I hold 2 passports. I live in different continents. I've been married twice to one. My first wife was Colombian American. My second wife is Thai. So I had always some cultural life is inside me. And my friends, by the way, are all from different places. So I love that. But I had to become in that way. And one thing also at that time, growing up Catalan, you got to remember we were coming from the Franco era, and we always felt Catalans that our culture was not respected. So because of that, I learned to be much more respectful for other cultures as a way to recognize that I also would have wanted my culture, although small or not in size, to be respected. And so I did kind of apply that same principle when I approach other cultures, countries, with respect, to learn, to understand, and to work together.
Yeah, no, that's great. That really is. It really sounds like the what was the name of the school in the French school in Barcelona?
Lycée Français of Barcelona it still is a very good school, but at that time it was a special school. You have to remember that I was enrolled there in the last years of the Franco era. So a lot of the people that actually sent their children there was not only to get a French European education, but also get away a little bit of the influence of the Spanish government at that time that had on schools, right? So it was like a little bit of an oasis living there.
Yeah, and you speak 7 languages, right?
I would say that, I should be able to speak 5, and then I have some knowledge here and there because of traveling with other languages. So obviously I speak Catalan, I speak Spanish, speak English, I speak French. I did learn German, and I was pretty good at German, although I haven't practiced too much. I just needed to get into the groove of that. I can defend myself speaking Italian. I learned Portuguese at one point. And then some words here and there in languages. So really to know really well, like fluent is 4 languages. And then I have a knowledge of other languages speak. But it's funny because, Simon, I think, at one time in my life, I used to go every month to China. I lived in Malaysia for almost 3 years. And I used to go to China because there were a Chinese team there reporting to me, not in a big city. I was going to Jiangxi province, and they had the head of the manufacturing, Mr. Li, which was a real character and somebody I know. And I met him every month, and I always had a translator, obviously. But the funny thing is, I kind of knew what he was saying at the end, because I kind of know his tone, his demeanor, kind of what he was trying to tell me. And I didn't understand. It was funny. Just by being with that gentleman so often and looking and understanding, you kind of develop that sensitivity to kind of understand, okay, he's in agreement, he's not in agreement, or he wants to say something or bring something. And so it's funny. It's funny how you, after a while, you kind of see that, and there's more than just the expression. It's just the way he moves, the way his intonation. I mean, this is the one thing that you learn to deal with people afterwards beyond the language itself.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And I think it's interesting with nonverbal communication. You hear that said, I hear that said so much about interacting on Zoom with large groups of people, for instance, on there, not being able to pick up the various cues that people normally pick up, actually. It's such an important part of communication, isn't it, really?
It is.
That's a great example, actually.
Work, and there's a communication after work where you are more relaxed, but you also get to know the person. But going back to Mr. Lee, I do remember some cases where we were discussing, he was giving a long answer, and the translator, which was one of the guys that was working with us, said, "Oh, Mr. Lee said he agrees." And sometimes I said, "No. Again, can you please ask Mr. Lee?" So you sometimes even question the translator because you knew that he was not translating everything that the gentleman had said or everything that he meant to say. So, but you know what? Overall, what I'm more proud about is that I earned his respect. And that's something that's the most important thing at the end of the came out with you is how did people see you? Did they respect you? And that's the most important thing, respect. Did you gain their respect? Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you could always get a job working as an international kind of soccer coach for an Arsenal or a Barcelona or something like this with the language skills. And a lot
of times one thing that he wants to get into involved in working in soccer directly. I'm not sure anymore. I think there's a romantic idea of it, but there's so much money in soccer and football, and I don't think it's for me. I don't think it's for me. And a lot of people aspire to be, I mean, not a coach, but in my case, people run for president of Barcelona. It's a very democratic institution. It's not owned by anybody but its own members. So you elect a president every 5 years. And that's a very, for a lot of people, is very, how can I say, attractive position because you become a very prominent person and you manage soccer, right? Which is a big pastime. And Barcelona is such an iconic institution. But there's too much money right now with players, agents, and that's not good. When you have too much money involved, it just corrupts people in a certain way, and that's what's happening. I prefer to watch, enjoy, and that's one thing I've never lost since I moved here for 20 years, as you very well explained in your introduction, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Tell me, were you in Paris in 2006?
No, I wasn't. That's one thing I have to tell you. I know you were there, you said, right? I don't know who you were supporting Arsenal.
I was supporting Arsenal, actually, and yeah, absolutely.
Well, it was a tight game. At least you were not in the Manchester United games, which I thought, especially the 1-3.
Oh, yes.
3-1 was a gift for Mr. Ferguson and Manchester United. I think we played to win 5-0, but
that was a
soccer. But yeah, that game I remember very well because we were losing, and then in the last minutes there were some movements in the bench, and then Arsenal end up losing. But it is what it is, and that was a big chance for Arsenal, and has not happened again. But look,
exactly.
We're not going to make this about soccer, but it goes by phases, and at least Arsenal is a much more patient club. That when you don't win, you're more understanding. Barcelona has to win every year. This year we didn't win anything, and it was like a freaking disaster.
Oh yeah, that's
winning for so many years. So you can't be 1 year without winning, and that's the problem all the time because you make very precipitous decisions, short-term decisions sometimes that it's difficult. Now Arsenal, though, you have to find the balance to make long-term decisions, but sometimes too long-term.
Yes,
so you haven't won in a long time, right? And that is the problem.
Absolutely, no, agreed. Absolutely agreed. Now, back to your career. Just picking up. I know you worked for 15 years or so, working for a number of consumer, personal, and food product companies. And it was always interesting because you went across to at the time Tate & Lyle and then Pure Circle. So you moved into that ingredients kind of space, and Was that a conscious choice? I wonder what kind
Yes,
of...
it was a conscious choice. It was a conscious choice. I think that, the one thing that's common in my career is I always been in the food industry, but I've evolved through time. So I started in consumer goods. As you said, I was actually working for candy companies. And I actually worked for Warren Lambert at that time. So I worked with Trident, chewing gum, but they also had Listerine, which I had been involved, although it's not necessarily food. And then from there, I went to a Spanish company at that time that was a very, very, very popular place to work. It was a very interesting, innovative place, which is called Chupa Chups. You probably know Chupa Chups, you call it in the UK.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. My daughter's a big fan.
Yeah, and then I went to Wise Potato Chips, which is the largest regional chip player here in potato chips, or crisp, like you would say in the UK.
Yeah.
Competing against Frito-Lay. So I did a career mainly in consumer goods, just because, I wanted to be in marketing initially. And marketing consumer goods is where you learn your best ropes, right? I mean, that's where it's more complete. You have to look into markets and competitive and much more dynamic than a lot of other industries. And then in 2005, I made a switch. I stayed in food, but then I decided to go to ingredients. And the reason is because Tate & Lyle contacted me, and they had the Splenda sucralose brand that was selling for B2B. The way B2C was Johnson & Johnson, and they were doing B2B. And there was a little bit of a consumer part of it. And I thought, and it was a global job, which is always what I wanted to mostly work for, right? I was working more in regional, local roles. And all of a sudden I had this opportunity to run sales and marketing for the Splenda sucralose B2B business on a global scale. And I thought that, and I also so I went into the ingredients and to the sweetener side. And then I was there for almost 4 years. And then I transitioned and went over to Pure Circle, which is the same industry, but in stevia, which was an industry that was nascent. And Pure Circle was a very good place to work at the time. It was very entrepreneurial. And I'm very happy that I contributed to build that business on a global basis. And, I enjoy that too. I enjoy being in ingredients because unlike when you work with a company in consumer goods, and you work with your brand, and you know the reality of your market every day, that's what you leave. When you are in a global position for a strategic ingredient like sucralose, or in that case stevia, you interact with a number of people around the world with different market realities. So, for instance, if I'll give you an example in sweetness, I learned a lot about the Chinese market, and how important like ready to drink teas are versus sodas, and what is sodas, diet sodas, what it means. So you understand these nuances, then you go to Latin America and you go every market and you say, okay, powder soft drinks there are very important. And then you see the legislation. So there is in a way, it's much more enriching in a certain way to be actually trying to help your B2C customers, launch products that are much more suitable or they can be more attractive for their consumers. So there is always a part of understanding the needs of your customers, and those needs can be on a global scale, they can be very different, and try to see how you can contribute to their goals. I think that is, I love it. I really loved it, right? Now, I didn't get to the ingredient part, which is commodities. It's not me.
Yeah.
But that area of value added and keeping that is a passion that I had. And my last job now, I've been almost 4 years in Agrofresh. Again, always in food industry, but I moved from ingredients to, let's say, how can I call that, is into more agriculture support. I mean, I'm not into the farming or growing or packing, but I'm in the support for the supply chain to make sure that products get fresher to the consumer and you extend the shelf life, which, at the end of the day is also something I'm very much enjoying now because I'm understanding a lot more agriculture. So if you go from packaged goods, to be frank with you, as a marketing person, you are a little bit superficious. You realize that. You don't understand enough about the different ingredients and what they mean and how they interact. So you learn that. I took a step back, and now I'm even taking a step further, which is actually looking at the primary ingredient, which is the agricultural product. So that's been my evolution. I enjoy it. I continue to enjoy it. I love it. And the other thing I want to say is every company I've been blessed to select and be able to select what I wanted to do. So I have to fall in love with the company's mission and what the company is trying to do. And if I do that, then I can give myself my best. Very difficult for me to be in a job that I find dull or not exciting, or I don't believe too much in what I'm doing, right? So, and that's what Agrofresh, I also totally believe in what we're doing here, what we're trying to accomplish. Obviously, at the end of the day, my biggest obligation is to society and the shareholders and all of that. But I think we have a very noble mission. You said very much when you introduced to find, launch, and provide solutions to extend the shelf life of fresh produce as a way to preventing waste and also providing a bigger financial return to my customers. So I think that's a very, very noble mission that I'm proud to represent.
Absolutely, yeah, and no, for sure it is, and even taking it back, I suppose, with Tate and Lyle and Pure Circle, with the stevia and the story around the kind of the health benefits of stevia. You can really see that move from more the marketing orientation on the consumer to as you've gone along, you can really see the companies and the very nature of their businesses are really solving issues and problems, and they're using technology to solve issues and problems. Really,
absolutely.
Right?
Well, that's the core of it is technology, and that's what I said before. Of course, I went from marketing to be marketing, sales, operations, manufacturing, and now I'm CEO. So you evolve over time. But as I said before, sometimes I find that consumer marketeers can be a little shallow on how we approach. Not everybody is, but you deal with a lot of people. They're very shallow. They don't understand what is a high intensity sweetener from a sugar polyol, and so it's if you don't understand and you don't understand what you kind of claims how to actually play, it's difficult to be a complete. And I think you find that the people are a little bit shallow. With all my due respect for marketeers, consumer goods, I was one at one point, right?
Yeah,
it's probably changing, but you do find some of those. It's all about packaging, advertising, and branding, but there is a substance of what you can do with that, and how can you elevate your brand with everything that's around you, right? Sourcing, ingredients, everything that you can make it so much more whole. And I think part of the problem in some of the consumer goods brands is that's the problem, right? That they didn't see that coming, and they're still resistant in some ways.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's definitely a novel mission with Agrofresh. Can you tell me a little bit more about the mission and a little bit more about specifically what we're dealing with a massive problem here, food waste. So what are you able to kind of attack here, and what are you able to solve?
Yeah, so let's take macro level. It is now there's a consensus that about 50% of all fresh produce, I'm not talking about other food categories, 50% of all fresh produce doesn't get consumed. I'm just talking about macro now. So what does it mean? I mean, with an exploding population, the last I checked, the world is not increasing its resources. So basically, we're having less resources to feed more people. And then you add other things there that actually has an influence and impact, like climate change and all of that, which just does have an impact because it makes the seasons more variable, more unpredictable, right? So all of that leads you to conclude that in a few years, if we don't do better, there are going to be a lot of people in this earth that will not be able to get access to food. And so that's in a very macro level. So what can you do from your side? I mean, there is two areas on the food waste. Obviously, there's a food waste management, which is basically when there is waste, can you recycle that back into the system? That's not where the area Agrofresh is trying to do. And then there is the food waste prevention, which is basically if you take some measures. In our case, once the fresh produce is harvested, till it gets to the consumer, and you become much more efficient, okay? And much more efficient means that you make sure that less produce gets wasted, and especially not only gets wasted, the most better quality products gets in front of the consumer. That's the way you're going to ensure that most of that is going to not, go to waste, and therefore you're going to be a lot more sustainable supply chain. So what is Agrofresh history and what we've done here for almost 20 years? We were the ones that launched a technology through our brand called SmartFresh. And SmartFresh basically incorporates a molecule 1 MCP that was discovered by the University of North Carolina, and we took it on and licensed it. And we were at that time part of Roman Haas, then we became Dow, and then we became an independent company 5 years ago. But basically what that does is that it does act on the ethylene receptors of the fruit. Now, why is it that important? Because the ethylene receptors are the ones who are responsible for the ripening of fruit. So when you take the 1-MCP SmartFresh and you put it in the air, right, very little particles, you don't need a lot. It does send a signal that neutralizes those ethylene receptors. So basically, ethylene receptors do not perceive ethylene anymore. So what happens? You slow down, right? You don't stop completely, but you slow down the ripening of the fruit. So as a consequence, that fruit has a longer shelf life and is in a position to be presented to the consumer in a good state for the consumer longer. Now, that was our core technology. It doesn't mean that there's no other solutions. Of course, we are now launching other solutions that we have, but our claim to fame with the SmartFresh. Today, SmartFresh is used around the world. I mean, if you look at Agrofresh company, we're based in Philadelphia, but only 25% of our revenue is in North America, and the rest is in around the world. So we have a presence in more than 40 countries. Our SmartFresh solution is used we have 4,000 direct customers, so we have had an impact for sure. And we changed completely the dynamics in this particular case because that was our core business initially, the apple industry. And there is a lot of statistics to show that when SmartFresh was launched, there was a lot of dynamics that changed. In the US, to give you an example, there used to be a lot more apples imported from the Southern Hemisphere, and that's not the case anymore because the apples that are picked in the US can take a full year to be consumed now, which basically gives a tremendous advantage from a sustainability standpoint. We have done sustainable studies that shows that over the past 15 years, we have had tremendous impact in Europe and the US in terms of reduction of carbon and water footprint. So that's very good. Plus, also, we have been able to get more apples to get to the consumer at the end. So that is with a core technology, we've been able to have this impact across. So we come with that base, and our goal is to expand into other solutions and into other crops, and that's where we are at, right? We start now working with citrus, we start working with tomatoes, avocados, etc. So we think that our solution or our approach to the problem can be extended to other crops, and so we can become a much more relevant company. If you look at all the startups that come out now, they make a lot of noise, is because they recognize that preventing food waste is a big idea that attracts money. So there's a lot of companies that make a lot of claims about what they're doing or not, and that's normal. It attracts technology in the place that people know that better use of your resources will be a key goal for the future of humanity, right? So you have a modest contribution, but our aspiration is to be a lot more relevant in the future, going into more crops.
Sounds tremendous. I mean, incredible to think. Did you say it can delay with apples? The MCP can delay it by up to a year.
Ethylene is a factor in most of fruits, right? There's a lot of ethylene in bananas, and a lot of ethylene in tropical fruits, in tomatoes there's ethylene, et cetera. But our sweet spot from the beginning has been apples, and our solution is applied in a storage room full of apples, about 1,000 bins of apples. You're talking about, probably 1 million over apples in a storage room, and you apply your solution. It's a gas that you put into the storage room. I mean, you're talking about 1 ppm, so it's a very, very small amount that you do. There's no trace, no residues. And basically what it does, and the impact it had, is if you had apples before that they are picked by October, normally by January you should be selling them to make sure that they are properly in good quality. Right now, with this solution, you can basically extend yourself to the next season, which is very good for packers because they can keep that better quality, but they can keep it longer. And if you're a packer, the issue you have with having to deal with price and supply and demand dynamics, you have to, depends on how the demand is, you're going to get a price or another. If you can actually manage that through a longer time, you kind of get more into a packaged goods dynamics where you can manage inventory a lot more efficiently. And that's kind of what we've done with the apple industry. Now, if you go into other crops, I think the same principle stands, but every crop is different. Apples go into storage rooms. We're now working with tomatoes. Tomatoes get shipped. You got to do application in the shipment. So, avocados also in the ripening room, bananas in the ripening room. So the passion of it is that physiology is there. You can really say that my solution works against ethylene receptors. The problem is every food has a different supply chain. So you need to know when and how to apply the solution, which is another art. So there's different layers, right? There's a physiology, biology level. Okay, it works. Then how do you apply that? And how you make it also economic and financially viable for every crop? And it's a passion. Every crop is a different market. Every crop is a different market. You have to approach it a little bit different, right? And today we have more solutions that one MCP is Smart Fresh. We also have coatings that you can actually help with respiration of the fruit. You have fungicides. You apply some fungicides that actually eliminate any problems with decay. And then you have a lot of the digital information, fresh cloud that we call it, because you can actually provide real-time information of what's happening with that inventory of fresh produce at any time in the supply chain, so you can make better decisions, etc. So again, we're investing to be more than just one solution. We're investing more to be just one solution for one crop. We're getting there, and I'm very excited at the prospects of the company.
Absolutely. It sounds like it's a job tailor-made for you, really, with the level of complexity and, as you've said, the global nature of the business as well. So, quite clearly, the mission, this is a really important kind of issue and challenge out there. So
when you think about the challenge, it's always been my issue that I need to be challenged all the time. And, I went from ingredients to completely different, and that intellectually pushes me to challenge myself on how to tackle this with what I know from my experience, but also adapting to a new reality. And that's a big, beautiful challenge. The other thing also I loved what I do or what I did in ingredients is to be able to understand technology and how to market technology. I think that's beautiful, a lot more relevant. Again, I go back to B2C. I love B2C, but technology, I'm so proud sometimes, Simon, because I work with all these engineers and PhDs and I'm there, right? And I can provide I can understand the basics of what they are proposing from a technology standpoint and how can it be marketed and understand the essentials of that, right? I love that because that's a constant challenge that you have to be intellectually.
Yeah, no, got it. Tell me, when you joined Agrofresh, as you've mentioned, the technology had come on a journey, it spun out. Were you the first CEO into Agrofresh after the spin out, as it were?
No, there was another gentleman that was before me that had only been there for 9 months. He was a Dow veteran, and I think the board decided to change course and break a little bit from, let's say, the old ways of doing things in Dow and everything. So they brought me in at that time, which is going to be 4 years in a couple of weeks.
4 years, okay. And so tell me a little bit about, from a cultural viewpoint, when you come into the organization and, the culture, tell me a little bit about the culture that you've built there and how you've gone around building that, as it were.
Yeah, I think first of all, I've been very fortunate to find very good people here. Generally speaking, it's good people, ethical people, hardworking people. They believe in what they do. But when you come in CEO, as a new CEO, it's natural that you want to really, bring your own culture and adapt to what the company is. I think that the only thing I'll say is that the biggest cultural transition that had to be done is coming from a big we were a small division of a big multinational. And therefore, we were not that central into what the company was doing. So in other words, when Dow went out and talked publicly about their quarterly results, I don't think that Agrofresh was in any way mentioned because it was small compared to the big corporation and what they were having to say. So not being the central focus and having to explain and understand your market and your business better was one of the things that we had to change, right? Because right now people say, okay, tell me more about the market, tell me more about share of market, tell me more penetration, things like that, things that never had to be widely explained, and you could continue. The other thing also was, and also another thing is having also the corporation behind you to do everything for you. And now all of a sudden you're an independent public company in which you have to provide all the services and stand on your own. And I think that that is a change from being a, part of a big thing and now becoming your own company, being much more entrepreneurial and forthcoming. And I also think that, I also think that, so that becoming more entrepreneurial, more independent, and doing things different was one of the big deals. You have to add also the fact that some of our key patents expired right at the time that we became an independent company. So that also needs a change of mentality. I believe that myself when I was in Splenda and the patents expired and there were competitors coming in. You have to just have a much more competitive mindset, not only entrepreneurial and competitive mindset. So you got to change that culture. Otherwise, over time, you may not be able to survive with a new environment. And you have to create a new platform and a new strategy so people can rally around. And that's been my biggest goal, is to make sure. And I think we're there. I think with the combination of some of the people that came along and some new people that came through, I think the blend of that it's starting to work.
Great. No, great. And how would you describe the culture? The culture and the values of the company.
I think the company, so the values is we live with what our mission is. So we always are looking at doing things right, not only in terms of our big mission, but also always doing them in a very ethical way, in making sure that we do things the proper way, from a regulatory in terms of how we treat employees, how we treat our customers, how we treat the environment. We really, in our core, it's not just a way of saying, we do believe in that. So that's very important, that. And also this higher mission that we have in terms of being good to the planet. And I think that's something that's underlying there. We do celebrate Sustainability Week. We help a lot of, in terms of corporate responsibility. We're going to start now doing things more engaged in African foundations, etc. So there is a part of the culture is that doing good. And another part of the culture that we're doing is that, we can do better all the time. We can do better, we can do more. We cannot just be comfortable with what we had accomplished in the past, because comfortable is the biggest problem that companies have. When you become comfortable on something, it's the beginning of the end, in my mind. So, pushing people to think outside the box has been a big accomplishment, thinking more entrepreneurial, not leaving any opportunity unturned. These are things that, are important, but always to this overriding big mission that we're doing this because at the end, it benefits us, but it does benefit most people, the planet, our customers. So we're doing something for our own gain, but also for the gain of the other.
Yeah. Okay. That's great. And just for you, knowing that this was your first CEO role, and as a publicly traded company, I know Pure Circle was as well. Publicly traded.
Yeah, it was number 2 in Pure Circle, but
yeah,
number 1 now here is.
Yeah. So how have you found? What have you found most challenging about that transition to being a little bit more in the public eye? Really, I mean.
So of course, there are a couple of things I would say. The first one is you come through the operations and you have a tendency to very suck into the operations. And you have to understand that, yes, operations have to run, but at the same time, you also have to be participating more and thinking more ahead in strategy, in capital structure, in investor relationships and things that I had participated, but I had never been the top dog, like they say. So that was one thing that had to force me to just break out a little bit of being operational. That's one thing that's very important. The second thing is, and that comes with being a public company, I think that you got to be more measured in how you do things. And I want to explain myself. You got to be careful that sometimes you're not misinterpreted, because you're very visible as the head of a public company. So some people may either misinterpret, and a lot of times they do it maybe in bad faith to go sometimes against you. So I understand more about. Obviously we're a small company, we don't have any issues, but you got to be careful, right? I think I like to have, my style is always to be very jovial with people, very friendly. And, what you find out is when you're in a position like the one I am, it's not always good to act that way with everybody, right? And it could be misinterpreted in a way. And I'm not saying anything wrong, but just being a little bit more, making more jokes or being more jovial, some people actually get a little bit, okay, he's the CEO of a public company. So you got to be a little bit more careful. Even if you don't do or say anything wrong, that it cannot be interpreted, because, again.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's great. That's great. Jordi, listen, I've really, really enjoyed this discussion. I just wanted to say as well, great news with your I know you've recently secured some growth capital that you've been working on for a while, and there's been some investment into the business, which is hopefully going to allow you to kind of grow and execute your kind of strategies. So big congratulations on that. I know that was something you were working on for a number of months. So great news with that. And I've really enjoyed this conversation. Thanks for your openness and transparency, and wish you all the best for the remainder of 2020 and onwards in 2020.
Beyond. Let's wish the best for all of us, since we are in this together with this pandemic. But I appreciate it, Simon. Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure to speak with you. And, I look forward to continue the relationship.
That's great. Thank you, Jordi.